Okay, great. Honorable Minister of Education, Vice Chancellor, Excellencies, distinguished guests, dear friends and colleagues, I take it as a singular honor to welcome everyone to the 5th International Conference on Science Advice to Governments, as INGSA2024, on the Transformation Imperative. My name is Donyo Dubanjo, and I'm the Executive Secretary of the Nigerian Academy of Science, as well as the Chair of INGSA Africa. This morning, it's indeed wonderful to see so many familiar faces from across the continent and around the world, truly inspiring and truly illustrating the strength, the diversity, and value of INGSA's network. I would like to welcome each and every one of you for joining us in this beautiful city, Kigali, for the first face-to-face INGSA conference since Tokyo in 2018. The last in Montreal had to be virtual because of COVID, but here we are. In particular, I would like to recognize and welcome our generous hosts, the Honorable Minister of Education, Honorable Gaspar Twagira Yezu, and of course the Vice Chancellor, I'm not sure I can see him yet this morning, Professor Kayura Muganga, without whom INGSA 2024 would not have been possible. Tonight, the University of Rwanda and the Vice Chancellor will host us all to a conference dinner, and we're all looking forward to that. Can I also recognize in absentia His Excellency, the President of Rwanda, President Paul Kagame, whose interest and support of INGSA laid the foundation for this event. As the co-chair and MC for this opening session, it is an honor to extend a personal welcome to the members of the INGSA board, to Sir Peter Gluckman, President of the International Science Council, and the first chair of INGSA, to my INGSA colleagues from around the world, of course our conference hosts, our conference sponsors rather, the representatives from the Conference Program Committee who were fundamental to shaping the future-focused themes of this meeting, and the dedicated members of the local organizing committee who made it possible, and definitely all our panelists. It's my privilege to co-chair this meeting alongside the president of INGSA, who is also Quebec's chief scientist, Professor Remy Quirion. We will hear from him shortly. I'll be your MC for today, but over the course of the next 2 days, you will be meeting many of the faces of INGSA. And we all look forward to meeting as many of you as we can. We have an exciting and packed schedule for today, and we're privileged to have a very special guest to officially declare open the conference. The downside to that is that the breaks will be rather short. Tea break, lunch break, they'll be rather short. But this is made up for, by the time you'll have to meet your fellow delegates before, during, and after the conference dinner tonight. Tomorrow's program will also give us a lot more space for discussions that will make this meeting very great. From my perspective, it's a fitting milestone for Africa to host INGSA's first conference in what is known as the Global South. And we thank Rwanda again for providing this opportunity. It is no accident that this meeting coincides also with INGSA Africa's efforts to lay a good foundation for what is known as INGSA Africa Rwanda Hub, which we expect will build capacity and become part of the regional leadership that INGSA Africa is providing. INGSA Africa was the first of INGSA's regional chapters to be established. And since 2016, the chapter has become a respected and trusted part of the continent's evidence-to-policy ecosystem. There is an increasing enthusiasm in many parts of Africa to embrace the value, equity, and potential of knowledge-to-policy systems. It has been an honor for me, and indeed the INGSA Africa Steering Committee, to support and foster that drive. by providing opportunities for skills development, networking, and providing the conduit, such as with INGSA2024, for Africa to access international expertise and to share their own successes with the rest of the world. One of the key themes of the conference is the importance of diversity. Across all of INGSA's work, this is foremost in our mind, and particularly when this programming for this event was being developed. And while you might not see it in every panel over the breadth of the conference, we're extremely proud of the diversity on display. Though this is a relatively small conference, we do have 39 countries represented on stage and almost 65 countries represented across the whole delegation. Now there's no better way to start than to find out more about INGSA on the global stage. So it's my pleasure to invite the president of INGSA, Professor Remy Kirion, to lead us into the plenary of the day. A round of applause, if you please. Now, might I say, if you don't clap well when I say, I make you repeat it. Thank you.
Bon matin à tous et à toutes, et bienvenue au congrès INGSA de Kigali, Rwanda. Le tout premier en Afrique, le tout premier dans le sud global. Good morning, everyone. Very warm welcome to the INGSA Kigali meeting, our very first global meeting in the Global South. As was mentioned by Doyen, INGSA is 10 years old and thriving thanks to key leader, whom we will celebrate a bit more tonight at the official dinner hosted by the University of Rwanda. But I already wish to mention a few here, and I like to ask them, when I mention their name, to please raise. So the first one, of course, Sir Peter Glockman. So Peter, if you can, everyone knows you, but still. And also unique contribution in the early days. And by mentioning a few, I'm sure I will forget some, but I'd like to ask Von to raise, Von Terekian. Tateo Arimoto, James Wisdom, Christian Allen, and I don't know if Romain Murenzi has arrived yet. So Romain is not here yet. Hopefully he will be here soon because he's giving a presentation in a few minutes. But I know he has to he was flying from the state where he's a teacher now. Also, of course, member of the steering committees of our chapter from Africa, from Asia, from Latin America and the Caribbean. A lot of members are here present in the room. And you know, chapters are the essence of INGSA. They had a great meeting yesterday. You'll hear about some of them later on this morning. But I really want to outline the importance, critical importance and role of the chapter at INGSA. Also acknowledge the contribution of a member of the INGSA board that are present with us this morning. So Tateo Arimoto already mentioned his name. Soledad is somewhere from Chile. Bimian as well, from Ethiopia. Doyen, you have of course seen him already. Mathieu is somewhere there. Wio, also somewhere in the back. Wio, thank you very much. And Salvatore Arico from ISC. And of course, a small but highly dedicated staff. Often, colleagues will think, INGSA is now over 6,000 members, 130, even more countries, so it might be a large team. Well, Christian, Grant, Virginie, other part-time people. So it's a very small team. But thanks to you, thanks to the chapter, we make it happen. As I mentioned, INGSA is 10 years old, and may I say that science advice and science diplomacy has never been more critical, more important, more essential. And capacity building globally is still the main mission of INGSA. So we have done a bit over the past 10 years. There is still much more to do. And of course, Africa is a critical component of INGSA. As Dorian mentioned, the first chapter was established here, and now we have a training hub at the universities of Rwanda and colleagues in the room here. So I'll ask Alfred, that I see there, and maybe colleague of Alfred at the training hub, Alice, I don't know if they are here yet, Alice, Alphonse, Janine, and Lydie. Are they here? Not yet. So they are really the key player in the local hub. I think also next 10 years, INGSA must diversify, adapt its approach and training strategy to the need and objective of our various partners. Thus far, we have mostly dealt with national government-level partners. But it's not sufficient anymore, and we need to explore capacity building in science advice at different levels. Of course, you could think of the highest level, in a sense, at the UN in New York City, and certainly there is link there of INGSA with the organization, the UN organization. But I will say, as importantly, sub-national level, that's my day job, in a sense, I'm probably a bit biased there, but at the local level, and more you'll hear about that. Science advice training in science advice at city-level government. And often they are the ones that are on a daily basis challenged by climate change, traffic in cities, these type of things. So linking them better with science and scientists is certainly something that is more and more needed. We have started various type of program on that front, but we need to do more. Especially here again in Africa. The cities are growing very quickly. It's a young population, so we have to be more and more in close contact at the city level, and certainly INGSA what to do more on that front. We are developing a new chapter in North America that will be focused on that, but of course it will be much broader and will extend to other chapters of INGSA globally. Finally, also a topic of interest to me, and there is focus in Europe on that issue, is what's the impact of culture, what's the impact of language on the successful delivery of science, successful delivery and practice of science advice. That's the focus of Europe, of the European chapter, but of course it applies extremely well here to Africa, with so many language, culture, so certainly we could learn from you and the way you work in terms of science advice, thinking about culture, thinking about language. Very important, and that for us, that's why we have created a new division of INGSA focused on that, the Réseau International Francophone en Conseil Scientifique. So I just see that Romain just arrived. Romain Murenzi, merci beaucoup Romain d'être avec nous, former minister in the government of Rwanda. Now onto the stage for the next part of the meeting this morning. So I'll ask head and chair of chapter to join me on the stage. So Doyen, INGSA Africa, Wio, INGSA Asia, Patricia Gadaleta on behalf of Latin America Chair Carlos Abeledo. You could just sit anywhere you want. Alfred for the African Rwanda Hub, Mathieu Ouimet for the network, the Réseau Francophone, Rokia Balo for Europe, and also Chris as the lead of the INGSA Legal Legislative Chapter. Then I'll join them, but the discussion this morning will be led by Christian Allen, that all of you know, the Executive Secretary of INGSA. She will lead the discussion over the next few minutes. Thank you very much. Christian, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Rémi. I'll join you on stage to sit down with this panel in a moment, but first I wanted to say bonjour, hello, muraho to everyone, and just give you a bit of context. You've heard a lot about the work that INGSA does, but I'm not sure you've heard how we are organized. So, as Rémi said, my name is Christiane Allen. I have had the great pleasure of working with INGSA since its inception. I've worked very closely with Sir Peter Gluckman in the early days of really designing how the network is organized. And it is a network. It's a community of practice, a global community of practice for researchers and policy professionals at that interface between science, policy, public, and publics, societies. But it's really part of that ecosystem. And the way we're organized is in multiple communities. Community can mean a lot. So you'll see here this morning represented geographic communities, linguistic communities, and of course, thematic, special themes communities. So I'll sit down now and take an opportunity to hear from everyone about this work and how it's organized in these chapters and communities of practice. Is everybody comfy?
Yes.
Great, thank you. And one of the things we really wanted to do with this year's meeting, the 5th biennial, and marking 10 years of INGSA, was to really make sure that people knew who and what INGSA was. And as Rémi said in his opening remarks, INGSA, the real heart of INGSA is the work of the chapters. So we're organized in a very devolved way. The chapters are semi-autonomous. You make your own work programs. We try to link it through the Secretariat. More recently, we've been working on integrating across chapters to make sure that we can all learn from each other. So I'd like to turn to the original chapter in Africa. And in turning to you, Doyen, I want to remark that when INGSA probably first was established on the back of an annual general meeting of what was then ICSU, and what is now the International Council for, the International Council for ISC, International Science Council. Peter's going to fire me.
He didn't hear you.
That was a meeting in New Zealand, and it was the African delegation at that meeting that at the end of it said to us, how can we keep this work going? We need to continue this, we need to network. So Doyen, tell us, you've been with the Africa chapter since its inception. Tell us about what you're proud of in the work that it's done, but also what you're looking forward to in the work that it's planning.
Well, I think, like you said, one of the challenges of being premier, of being the premier chapter, is that we had no real template to work with. So we basically had to chart the path for chapters, and find how to do this. And some of the things we really had to do, and I think laid the foundation for the successes, as it were the fact that we quickly worked at a governance structure, and worked at managing the diversity, in the team. And I think we did that quite well. We also realized very quickly that one of the first tasks was creating awareness. Across the continent, there wasn't enough awareness, so we worked hard at creating awareness. We then started doing a lot of workshops, both workshops that we organized and hosted, and others that we were invited to. So we worked with a lot of partners, we took on a lot of invitations, spoke at a lot of places, and ensured the awareness was really rising. And it was really useful using the INGSA model of case studies. That was very useful, very different, unique, and interesting to people. So we quickly built up, and we quickly built up partnerships across the continent. First determining what's the niche for INGSA Africa. What's the actual need and niche for it that doesn't compete with other entities in that space. And once we could identify that, we created the partnerships across board, and that included key partners like NASAC, the Network of African Science Academies, so we became partners to virtually all the academies on the continent, 28 at least of them. In Africa, we became partners to them, recognized by them, accepted by them. We could work very readily, and we have, over the years, worked with them. In more recent times, we've worked with partners like Future Africa in South Africa. So the partnership, the development of partnerships was very important as well for us. So I think it's those key things, straightening out governance, managing diversity very carefully and very strategically, and developing key partnerships across the continent. I think those were very major achievements for us. And of course, we've laid on top of that key programs now, like the mentorship program that we run, skills advancement development program, and we're running a second cohort now that has led to a global, a global meeting on for indigenous youth on climate change. INGSA Africa is a major partner and a major driver for that. That was one of the mentees from that program that we had that basically drove this global event. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Or shall I continue?
You could go on, I'm sure. But we'll hear more, actually, about some of those innovations that INGSA Africa has brought in a parallel session tomorrow for those who are able to take part. I think Shaheen is presenting that mentorship program, which really has been innovative for the whole network. Staying with Africa, and also talking about those partnerships, and because that is the sort of modus operandi of INGSA, is to partner with existing organizations. One of them has been with the University of Rwanda and developing a specific hub in its infancy still, but dedicated eventually to looking at more consistent and standardized training that can be offered. So Alfred Bisosa from the university, do you want to give us just a really brief few words about that?
Yeah, thank you very much, Christian. Good morning, everyone. The INGSA Africa Hub Rwanda, which is hosted by the University of Rwanda, I may say that it's now almost 2 years that we are there and we are operating. And this came as a result of different initiatives that started around 2018, when one of the workshops came in on science, and some of the people were there, and they are also in the room. So the interests keep to growing, and say, why not have a hub that is going to promote capacity building in science advice, and which is going to be hosted in Rwanda. And this was also a result of different conversation with the president of INGSA, Remy, and His Excellency President Paul Kagame. So now the chapter or the unit currently is trying to establish and strengthen the existing ecosystem of science advice. Mm-hmm. We know there are already institutions like Rwanda Academy of Science. We have National Council for Science and Technology. Mm-hmm. We have different agencies and government agencies that are more involved in science. So what we have to do first was basically to have a stakeholders meeting to sit together and reflect what will be the position of this INGSA hub, what will be the purpose and the focus in terms of science advice. And then we had also to extend the membership, where all research centers of excellence are now members. Yeah. And we are promoting in the sense of having also the chief technical advisors from the governments. So these are the people who need science and information to advise the different sector ministers. So this is the process we are going to. We start as phase 1, building the internal capacity that we need as a hub. Number 2, trying now to spread the efforts into the region, which is going to be part of next programmatic interventions.
Great, yeah. Thank you so much. And may I mention as well, Alfred, that we're delighted to hear that you've got a piece coming out in Nature Viewpoints just this week that reflects on this meeting, the planning for this meeting, and some of the work that you're doing here in Rwanda and with INGSA. So we're delighted to know that that's coming out soon.
This is coming very soon.
Yeah. So take a look at Viewpoints in Nature for that. Thank you. Let's turn to Asia. I feel so privileged to do a round-the-world tour right here on stage. We'll head over to Asia now and speak with Wee Hoa Tan about the INGSA Asia work that's going on. What are you, let's say, most proud of, some of the successes of your chapter, but also what are you looking forward to coming up?
Thank you. So, I'm Wee Hoa, come from Malaysia, representing INGSA Asia. I'm very proud to be part of the INGSA family. Although I'm quite new, okay, I joined this year, okay. But I bring in with the relationship and connection that I already have after being inspired by my immediate boss, okay, Professor Zachary. Professor Zachary is one of the, I think the patron for INGSA Asia, okay, as you can see. He sent his regards to all of you. He tried to come, but he cannot. So what we have done so far in INGSA Asia is, there are two major things. First, is during the COVID-19 pandemic, we have the CSUN NASM project, which is related to zootonic spillover. It's a project that study what happens if there's another pandemic, okay, happen in a specific location in, let's say, in Asia or any part of the world. What are the neighboring countries can do? So we gather governmental officials, advisors, science advisors from many countries, and we have a closed-door meeting, and with that we come up with a guidebook. And all of you, if you check your goodie bag, you can scan the QR code and read the guidebook. So that is one of the contributions that I think INGSA Asia, with the help of the HQ, okay, and also friends from other countries, including United States of America, to develop the guidebook. That's one thing. And the second thing that we are doing is we call it grassroots science advisory or promotion awards. So what we have done is we provide seed grant to conduct capacity building workshop. So applicants can come from any part of Asia. They submit their proposal, and then their proposal will be read through by our steering committee. And if the proposal is chosen, then we will do the matching to afford the conduct of capacity building workshop in the country. And then with that, we managed to see the science advisory and promotion of INGSA projects throughout Asia. This is something that we hope maybe in later years we can have this idea expanded to other parts of the world.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And may I mention as well that model that you've described of the NASM project on a guidebook for zoonotic spillover. I mean, that's a great example, isn't it, of how when an organization was looking for a partner in the region that was a useful sort of, might we say, neutral broker that could help disseminate and could help bring together different other actors in the region across borders, and went to INGSA as a key partner for that to help them with that work. So, and that's exactly the sort of role that INGSA can play in regions when international organizations or multilateral organizations are looking for those partners. So thank you for that great example and a real role model example, I think, as well as is the grassroots workshop. Thank you for that. Let's head over to Latin America and the Caribbean with Patricia Gadeleta, who is representing your chapter chair. Carlos could not make it here, but we're so delighted to have you, and indeed a new face for us in INGSA. And tell us a little bit about the work of the chapter and the steering committee in Latin America and the Caribbean.
Okay, thank you, Christine. I am here on behalf of our chapter chair, Carlos Aveledo. It's a privilege to be here. I am very enthusiastic, and my group of the chapter, Latin America chapter, are very glad to be here. Since 2017, from the beginning of INGSA LAC, we feel that we have a work to do in the region on science advice and science diplomacy, and we feel very engaged with the work that we have in front of us, proposed by Peter Gluckman in occasion of a workshop in Buenos Aires. And since then, we consistently work firstly in capacity building to bring the insight of INGSA to different Latin American and Caribbean cities, like, for example, Santiago de Chile, Jamaica, Panama, Mexico, Colombia, in Bolivia, in Santa Cruz de la Sierra, Bogota, well, different cities. And then we organized during the pandemic many workshop and webinar. And then we began to build in the community, in different stakeholders and actors like legislators, researchers, young scientists, and we held usually the annual meeting of INGSA LAC, mostly virtually, but this year will have a in-person meeting in Colombia, in the San Andres Island. You are welcome to come. And we held some competition essay, some contest on science advice, different topic. At the beginning it was general, then with the COVID pandemic, the issue was COVID pandemic. And last year was related with the Global Biodiversity Framework coming in Montreal. We developed a postgraduate course on the basis of government advice in science advice in Mexico with the support of CINVSTAB, a very important regional center of research. And we support the graduate course in science diplomacy in neuroscience organized by UNESCO. And since the beginning, we want to know the state of the science advice in the region. So we did some survey in all the region. Then we focused on Colombia, and now we are conducted some survey in Chile, in Peru, to have a good insight of the situation of government advice in the region. So this is our activity. We have a lot of ideas in our mind, and we discuss always what can do next. And now we are thinking with the support of UNESCO, to prepare, we signed a memorandum of understanding to write a book in Spanish, to have material resources in our language for capacity building and to teach how we do the things, some cases of Latin America issues. So, I have more things to
and we'll hear
say.
more also in some of the parallel sessions too. I know we'll hear about that course and the curriculum.
Yes.
And just allow me to point out something that you've brought to my mind is the fact that the INGSA steering committee members themselves bring their own networks to the INGSA, the work of the INGSA chapter. And that's where there's some really nice cross-fertilization and some sharing that can go on within regions. So the opportunity to be in partnership with UNESCO, I'll point out as well that there's a member of your steering committee that's also a point person on the ground for the ISC, the International Science Council, got the title right this time.
Yes, yes.
But it's those types of networks and linkages that I think are really important that INGSA provides.
Yes, and we
Great.
are very grateful for works with our partner.
Yes, thank you for that. All right, well, let's head from Latin America to Europe, which is a fairly new presence. So the initial INGSA chapters were in the Global South, in Africa, well, Asia, parts of the Global South and Southeast Asia in particular, and in Latin America and the Caribbean. So the European presence for INGSA, although we've had friends in Europe for a very long time, galvanizing that as some kind of a footprint, I don't know if I call it chapter yet, has been longer in the making because there has been so much going on in that space. But we've recently been able to work with the INGSA Vice President, Dr. Claire Craig, in the UK, and Rokia Ballo, who's an emerging expert in science advice and questions of equity that brings up. And what you've done in Europe is really using almost a sort of a catalyst project to help bring together the chapter around a particular project. Do you want to talk to us about that, Rokia?
Yes, so hi everyone, and thank you so much for having me here on behalf of Claire, who sends her apologies for not being able to be here. So the European chapter, or emerging chapter, as you say, was focused around questions of language and culture in science advice. Really first flagged by Professor Kirion as a particular interest for INGSA. So how in areas of kind of rich linguistic diversity and cultural diversity, does that impact the provision of science advice? What are some of the implications for future policy and practice? So with our really wonderfully engaged advisory board, and taking lessons, I think, from the INGSA Africa chapter in terms of taking a case study approach, we chose a few countries to look at to answer this question. So we wanted countries, EU member states and non-EU member states, and countries with multiple official languages and those with fewer, 1 or 2 official languages. And so this started in 2023, and since then we've actually been able to achieve quite a lot, I think, with lots of support from, as I said, our advisory board and just the networks that they bring in. So in the first phase of the project, we hosted a 2-day workshop in London where we had researchers and policymakers join us to answer some of these questions, and you're seeing some of those pictures there, and to really test the questions that we were asking. Are these good questions? How will they be useful for practitioners? And how do we turn those into research questions? How do we explore the research that's already being done in this area? Because we know that this is something that is important, but what are the ways that the different ways that it's being looked at? So we held the workshop. We also interviewed colleagues at different national academies across Europe, and they really helped us focus in on the way language matters, and the way language can sometimes be a proxy for kind of more cultural issues, where it's sometimes quite difficult to drill down into what we mean when we say culture. Language was quite a good bridge to get us to some of those discussions. And in the second phase of the project, which we've just finished, we hosted a series of roundtable discussions with experts, one of which we were able to do in multiple languages with the support of not members of the advisory board, but connections that we made along the way with members of Baltic states. So this was in English and Polish, this roundtable. So yeah, I think that's a bit of an overview of the project and some of the things we've been able to achieve in a really short time.
Thank you so much for that. And my own observations from that project is that it was almost an unexpected but very welcome way to bring people together around something that they perhaps hadn't given much thought to, but when they started to think more carefully and drill down into those questions, as with anything when you start to think more carefully about it, all sorts of things surfaced that were useful in INGSA's work that we can and will share across chapters as well as we move on with that project, but certainly a catalyst for some collaboration in the region. And it took people, I think, outside of their day jobs to come to that and to put their minds together on something new. So that was really interesting work, and we're looking forward to where that's headed. All right, let's wrap up at least our Around the World tour. We'll come back to thematic communities in a moment, but our Around the World tour, we'll head over to North America, and we'll come back to Professor Kirian. Tell us about the growing presence of INGSA in North America. Not unlike Europe, it's a new sort of emerging space for INGSA because there had been so much going on there already. Can you tell us a few words about how that's being built and what you're looking forward to?
Yeah, it will be brief, it will be short. It's still in the growing phase. It's still a bit of a dream, I will say. And it should be, in this seat, should be Virginie in front of me, but she preferred not to be on the stage because she's really the one doing more of the work on a daily basis. By daily basis, I will mean before a lot of time spent on the organization of the meeting here, so maybe 6 months ago. But there is a lot of interest, as I mentioned in the opening remark, of building capacity, building science advice at the local level. In French, what we call proximity government. And basically, they are in close contact with their citizens, and they want to do more on that front. And really, climate change, the impact of climate change, is our eye-opener for many of these cities. What we decided to do, we have established, it's not us, but in Quebec, various cities have decided, mid-sized cities, decided to hire, to create a science advisor position for their cities. So what we decided to do for the INGSA chapter over the next few years to focus on mid-sized city. New York City, Boston, these type of cities, they already have a lot of link with academia and so on. Probably they are not as much in the need of science advice, quick science advice, practical science advice. Mid-sized city, much more. So now we're discussing in Canada with various cities, in the US with various cities, and Mexico is always a little bit in between, part of Latin America and part of North America, so maybe they'd be able to be on both fronts, which is great, because I think cities, science advice at the level of cities, we're starting something in North America, but rapidly it will expand all over the world, because there is already a lot of activities in Europe on that front, for example. Merci beaucoup.
Great, thank you for that. And we're looking forward to that focus on cities, because I think that, I mean, it makes sense starting in North America with a more of a thematic project that way, just as in Europe, it catalyzes thinking. But clearly that too will have a lot of spillover knowledge and understanding that can be adopted by the other chapters. So watch this space a little bit in terms of how we can use that and how the other chapters might also want to apply that kind of work. So that wraps up the Round the World tour, but let's turn to what we've been doing in other sort of communities of practice in INGSA. And so coming back maybe to that question of linguistic diversity, one of the things that under Professor Kirian's presidency we've done is to start sort of an INGSA equivalent, but for the Francophone world. So Mathieu Ouimet, do you want to tell us a little bit about how it's really got started? It's just over a year, and I know you have a very ambitious program of work that you've started to develop and pull in partners to. Can you tell us a bit more?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So first, I'm Mathieu Ouimet. I'm a professor in political science at Laval University, and I'm doing research on evidence-based policy. It's my main research program. So we were very happy when we saw the grant competition to create this network. So we got funding from FRQ, okay, as you said, 15 months ago. And so we start from nothing. And the goal really was to create, and our goal, long-time goal, is to create a sustainable Francophone network. The first thing we did is we put in place a governance structure. So we have on our steering committee, we have a vice chancellor for various universities in Quebec and elsewhere. We also, it's very important because you have people who are not francophone must understand that there is an institution of La Francophonie with different various organizations, network of university, network of government, international organization of La Francophonie. So on our board, we have representative of key institutional player in La Francophonie. So in terms of our activity, so now the network is up and running. We have 3 streams, in fact. A research stream, because it's very important for us to bridge the gap, I will say, between science and science advice and the practice of science advice, because there is a long tradition of research on this topic. So we already started to be active. So we have postdoctoral fellowship. Every year we have a postdoc to promote and help researchers who do research on science advice. So we will have our second fellowship that will start in September. We help the doctoral students too. And what we want to make is to create a platform for researchers to enter their protocol of research and create a network of milieu of research, because it's very difficult to collect data. But this is the research side, and it's not our main mission. Our main mission is the second stream, I would say. It's training and tools. So we are working right now with Université Saint-Gall, Alexandria, in the development of a training online course that will be targeting, we call it in French, advisor, not really science advisor, but advisor in the cabinet office and in the public administration, to sensibilize them about science advice, different structures, and so on. And so we will be very active on the training front.
Great.
Promoting tools that already exist. For example, are these repository databases of knowledge synthesis that exist but are unfortunately not used enough.
Yeah.
So we promote them on our website too. And the third stream will be the community of practice and knowledge transfer. So, and we start being active first on 2 fronts. We will have webinars that will start soon, but also we will do a deliberative dialogues workshop, 2 days workshop, regional workshop. So we will start with Senegal. Then in November, we will organize a workshop, 2-day workshop with the Parlement du Luxembourg on parliamentary science advice. So we will be looking in this workshop about the mechanism in place to do science advice and learn from different experience, and we will do research at the same time. Okay.
Thank you.
So it's
wonderful, thank you. And one of the things I'm noting in your intervention is all of the synergies across the INGSA family. And that's something that we as a secretariat are really trying to integrate more, but with a view to also, leveraging what the different groups are doing, and in particular, your work around building a curriculum. I noted that also in the Latin America group has done similar, and these are important in their context, but let's also look at what we can share across them. The same with parliamentary legislative science advice. We know that Francophone legislative systems can be quite different. It's from a different sort of institutional tradition, but there's a lot there that as a network we have the ability to share and to expand those learnings. So we're really looking forward to what Rifix is going to present. And I'll just finish up and we're just on time in our last 5 minutes with Chris Tyler, who in fact specifically looks at these issues of legislative science advice, let's say in contrast to government executive science advice. So Chris, tell us a little bit about that work and where it's headed within the INGSA family and across the different chapters, how you'd like to see that happen.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. INGSA recognized really quite quickly, having been set up with this mission to bring together people providing science advice in governmental contexts, that the type of advice required in legislatures is very different because of the way they're structured. They're far more political, they're far more messy, and the role that science advisors play in congressional, parliamentary, and so on settings is just very different. So it was important to build that network, network out. Now, some of the things that you can just put a flag on and say, look, these are some fantastic things that INGSA have done, include establishing brand new advisory units in congresses, for example, in Spain and Peru and Argentina. But actually, I think the thing I'm most proud of the work that we've done with the INGSA chapter is establishing the framework of science advice as something that's useful in congresses. Mm-hmm. So historically, dating back to the 70s, most of the sort of evidence provision in parliaments has been really focused around technology options assessment, beginning in the States and then moving into Europe. And that's useful and important, but the needs of parliamentarians go far beyond technological assessment. They're interested in issues like education and immigration and economy and so on, which academia has a huge amount to say about. And gradually we have been evolving those technology assessment frameworks into the much broader science advice framework, which INGSA is championing. And 10 years ago, when we were talking about science advice in congressional parliamentary settings, it was a really alien concept to be talking about legislative science advice. And just before coming here, I've finished co-writing a book chapter with probably the world's foremost technology assessment experts. The two of us have written something that would have been unthinkable when INGSA started. Mm. And it's through the research that took place at INGSA Tokyo, a series of papers that were published, many of whom in the room are actually co-authors of those papers. Now, Armin Grunwald and myself are writing a chapter talking about science advice in Parliament alongside technology assessment, and it would have been impossible 10 years ago. INGSA has been instrumental in that.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you for pointing out, almost by way of contrast as well, the type of work that INGSA does both practically on the ground in the chapters, but also in building this discourse, right? I mean, that's academic work as well, and the fact that, and I know you've been here at other conferences for a while now, helping to build up that discourse, putting people together, testing out ideas, and then going away and writing about them. And that's how the ideas snowball and become something. They in your case, you talk about how some have institutionalized in ways of doing business in parliament. So we're delighted that INGSA can provide that kind of platform to be able to build those ideas. So we've seen everything from very practical, the NASM guidebooks in Asia, to curricula in Latin America, to this idea of building a global discourse around something that 10 years ago, as you say, maybe didn't exist or didn't exist in such a concrete way. So I'm so pleased that our delegates have been able to meet you on stage, and I invite them, if they see you out at breaks and throughout the day, to please feel free to come and talk to some of these core members of the INGSA family and INGSA's work, find out more about what they do, find out how they might be helpful to you, or you might want to be involved in their work. And thank you so much, everyone, and please join me in thanking our distinguished panelists.